some more readings on the Four Noble Truths. And I thought I'd just do a few selections this evening regarding the third noble truth, the realization of the path, the ending of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the goal of our practice. So just have a few selections from, first from the book The Island, which is Lungpo Pasano's and Ajahn Amro's anthology of the Buddha's teachings on Nibbana. And then I'll do some readings from Bhikkhu Bodhi's In the Buddha's Words, just a kind of a run-through of some of his favorite descriptions from the suttas on the goal, on Nibbana. So I thought I'd start with a quote that is actually the very last part of the book from Lungpo. And you have to kind of listen to it closely. It's from Yogi Berra, who is an American baseball player. I think I'll start with, there's a phrase where people where people use words, but kind of, they don't make a lot of sense, but they make a lot of sense. And Yogi Berra was a master at that. I was just going to ask if anybody knew what the word was that for bonus. Malaprop, or malapropism. Yes. So this is one of those, but applicable to what we're talking about tonight. And it is, if you don't know where you are going, you will wind up somewhere else. So that is a malaprop, or malapropism, pertinent to Nibbana. So I'm going to be starting in the very last chapter, starting on page 344. When the Buddha speaks of supreme bliss, it is hard for ordinary human beings to understand the meaning. We tend to draw conclusions based on our worldly experience. So when we contemplate the goal of the teachings, we need to be careful that we are considering things from a proper perspective. The Buddha certainly does speak of the happiness of attainment, but what exactly does he mean? Is it anything that we are familiar with? In this next quote, Ajahn Chah points to this, along with another commonly misconceived principle in Buddhist practice. And this is from Everything Arises, Everything Falls Away. When we realize things as this one Dhamma, all being of the same nature, we relax our grip, we put things down. We see they are empty, and we don't have love and hate for them. We have peace. It is said, Nibbana is the supreme happiness. Nibbana is the supreme happiness. Please listen to this carefully. Happiness in the world is not supreme ultimate happiness. What we conceive of as emptiness is not supreme emptiness. If it is supreme emptiness, there is an end of grasping and attachment. If it is supreme happiness, there is peace. But the peace we know is still not supreme. The happiness we know is not supreme. If we reach Nibbana, then emptiness is supreme. Happiness is supreme. There is transformation. The character of happiness is transformed into peace. There is happiness, but we don't give it any special meaning. There is suffering also. When these occur, we see them as equal. Their value is the same. End quote. Therefore, the happiness synonymous with liberation is not tied to the world and not tainted by sensuality. And we can see that after the Buddha's enlightenment, the happiness of the untainted mind was accessible to him. And then from Majjhima Nikaya 14. But friends, I can abide without moving my body or uttering a word, experiencing the peak of pleasure for 1 day and a night, for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 days and nights, for 7 days and nights. What do you think, friends? That being so, who dwells in greater pleasure, King Senya Bimbisara of Magadha or I? That being so, the Venerable Gautama abides in greater pleasure than King Senya Bimbisara of Magadha. In addition to this type of pleasure, accessible to those who have realized Nibbana, there are more refined aspects which can be realized. In this next quotation, the Buddha details all the different attainments of absorption and refinement of mind, ending with Nirodha Samapatti, the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling. In each case, he refers to a more sublime happiness. At first glance, the cessation of perception and feeling would not appear to be happiness at all. But the Buddha is pointing out that wherever and whenever we are able to be free from suffering, that is an aspect of well-being. The absence of any obstruction and stain is also what the Buddha perceives as happiness. Contemplating this passage allows us to stretch our notion of what the highest pleasure or happiness might be. This is from Samyutta 36, number 19. Though some may say, this is the supreme pleasure and joy that brings experience, the being's experience, I would not concede this to them. Why is that? Because there is another kind of happiness more excellent and sublime than that happiness. And what is that other kind of happiness? Here, Ananda, by completely transcending the base of neither perception nor non-perception, a bhikkhu enters and dwells in the cessation of perception and feeling. This is that other kind of happiness, more excellent and sublime than the previous kind of happiness. Now it is possible, Ananda, that wanderers of other sects might speak thus. The ascetic Gautama speaks of the cessation of perception and feeling, and he maintains that it is included in happiness. What is that? How is that? When wanderers of other sects speak thus, Ananda, they should be told, the Blessed One, friends, does not describe a state as included in happiness only with reference to pleasant feeling. But rather, friends, wherever happiness is found, and in whatever way, the Tathagata describes that as included in happiness. Because the happiness of Nibbana is so far out of the range of our ordinary perceptions and assumptions, there is an inherent difficulty in discerning what it could possibly be. Our tendency is to rely on familiarity with gratification or stimulation. But even in normal circumstances, it is easy to see that when desirable things have impinged on consciousness for too long, they become tedious or irritating. In this next sutta, Sariputta equates happiness with relief from a less exalted sensation or stimulus, so that there ceases to be an affliction. And this quote is from the Anguttara Nines, number 34. I have heard that on one occasion, Venerable Sariputta was staying near Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrels' feeding sanctuary. There he said to the monks, "This Nibbana is pleasant, friends. This Nibbana is pleasant." When this was said, Venerable Udayin said to Venerable Sariputta, "But what is the pleasure here, my friend, where there is nothing felt?" "Just that is the pleasure here, my friend, where there is nothing felt. There are these 5 strings of sensuality. Which 5? Forms cognizable by the eye, agreeable, pleasing, charming, endearing, fostering, desire, enticing, sounds cognizable via the ear, smells cognizable via the nose, tastes cognizable via the tongue, tactile sensations cognizable via the body. Agreeable, pleasing, charming, endearing, fostering desire, enticing. Whatever pleasure or joy arises in dependence on these 5 strings of sensuality, that is sensual pleasure. Now there is the case where a monk, quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first jhana, rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with sensuality, that is an affliction for him. Just as pain arises as an affliction in a healthy person for his affliction, even so the attention to perceptions dealing with sensuality that beset the monk is an affliction for him. Now the Blessed One has said that whatever is an affliction is stress. So by this line of reasoning, it may be known how Nibbana is pleasant. Then there is the case where a monk, with the stilling of directed thought and evaluation, enters and remains in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure, born of composure, unification of awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with directed thought, that is an affliction for him. Then there is the case where a monk, with the fading of rapture, remains in equanimity, mindful and alert, is physically sensitive to pleasure, and enters and remains in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasurable abiding. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with rapture, that is an affliction for him. Then there is the case where a monk, with the abandoning of pleasure and stress, as with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, enters and remains in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with equanimity, that is an affliction for him. Then there is the case where a monk, with the complete transcending of perceptions of physical form, with the disappearance of perceptions of resistance, and not heeding perceptions of diversity, thinking infinite space, enters and remains in the dimension of the infinitude of space. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with form, that is an affliction for him. Then there is the case where a monk, with the complete transcending of the dimension of the infinitude of space, thinking infinite consciousness, enters and remains in the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with the dimension of the infinitude of space, that is an affliction for him. Then there is the case where a monk, with the complete transcending of the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, thinking there is nothing, enters and remains in the dimension of nothingness. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, that is an affliction for him. Then there is the case where a monk, with the complete transcending of the dimension of nothingness, enters and remains in the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. If, as he remains there, he is beset with attention to perceptions dealing with the dimension of nothingness, there is an affliction for him. Now the Blessed One has said that whatever is an affliction is stress. So by this line of reasoning, it may be known how pleasant Nibbana is. Then there is the case where a monk, with the complete transcending of the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception, enters and remains in the cessation of perception and feeling. And having seen that with discernment, his mental fermentations are completely ended. So by this line of reasoning, it may be known how Nibbana is pleasant. I think that's a really interesting sutta for many reasons. The one that catches my attention mostly is the fact that these are really dynamic states. Sometimes we think of, these attainments, whether the form jhanas, the four jhanas, or the immaterial attainments, starting with the space perception, that the infinitude of space and on up, that there is still the ability to actually be alert and aware, particularly when state like that you've entered is invaded by some of the characteristics of the previous one that you had just let go of. So it's not like you've shut the door to all experience if the defilements are strong enough, and they kind of push in from below, an earlier attainment into the one you're in now, then you find that disturbing. The person feels that as an irritant, as stressful, as dukkha. So just pointing to that, all of these are conditioned states, but that they can be known, and that there is a fluidity there. They're dynamic states, not just trance-like states. And that until one reaches the goal, there is even small amounts of dukkha, stress, still present. The Buddha phrases this principle in a slightly different way, or more directly, where he says, "And what bhikkhus is happiness more spiritual than the spiritual? When a bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed reviews his mind, liberated from lust, liberated from hatred, liberated from delusion, there arises happiness. This is called happiness, more spiritual than the spiritual." Samyutta 36:31. In other words, there is definitely a happiness experienced with the destruction of all defilements and mental obstructions and the cessation of dukkha. Here we have another aspect of happiness indivisible from Nibbana in the bright states of mind, such as gratitude, humility, and respect that arise along with the realization of Nibbana. From Majjhima 35, number 26. When a bhikkhu's mind is thus liberated, he possesses three unsurpassable qualities: unsurpassable vision, unsurpassable practice of the way, and unsurpassable deliverance. When a bhikkhu is thus liberated, he still honors, reveres, and venerates the Tathagata thus. The Blessed One is enlightened, and he teaches the Dhamma for the sake of enlightenment. The Blessed One is tamed, and he teaches the Dhamma for taming oneself. The Blessed One is at peace, and he teaches the Dhamma for the sake of peace. The Blessed One has crossed over, and he teaches the Dhamma for crossing over. The Blessed One has attained Nibbana, and he teaches the Dhamma for attaining Nibbana. During the Buddha's time, many of his fellow Sakyans left the home life and trained under him. One of these was Bhattiya, who had been the clan ruler and had left his position to take ordination in a group which numbered such well-known disciples as Ananda, Anuruddha, Devadatta, Bhagu, and Upali. During his first rains retreat, Bhattiya realized liberation. His story is recounted in the Udana. "Thus have I heard, at one time the Lord was staying at Anupiya in the mango orchard. At that time, the Venerable Bhattiya, Kaligoda's son, on going into the forest to the foot of a tree or to an empty place, constantly uttered, 'Ah, what bliss! Ah, what bliss!' A number of bhikkhus heard the Venerable Bhattiya constantly uttering, 'Ah, what bliss! Ah, what bliss!' And the thought came to them, 'No doubt, friend, the Venerable Bhattiya, Kaligoda's son, is dissatisfied with leading the holy life, since formerly, when he was a householder, he enjoyed the bliss of royalty. And when recollecting that, on going into the forest, he utters, 'Ah, what bliss! Ah, what bliss!' Then a number of bhikkhus approached the Lord, prostrated themselves, sat down to one side, and reported this to the Lord. Then the Lord addressed a certain bhikkhu, 'Come, bhikkhu, in my name tell the bhikkhu Bhattiya, the teacher calls you, friend Bhattiya.' 'Very well, revered sir,' the bhikkhu replied, and approaching the Venerable Bhattiya, Kaligoda's son, he said, 'The teacher calls you, friend Bhattiya.' 'Very well, friend,' the Venerable Bhattiya replied, and approaching the Lord, he prostrated himself and sat down to one side. The Lord then said to him, 'Is it true, Bhattiya, that on going into the forest, you utter, "Ah, what bliss! Ah, what bliss!"' 'Yes, revered sir. But Bhattiya, what do you see that prompts you to do so?' 'Formerly, revered sir, when I was a householder and enjoyed the bliss of royalty, inside and outside my inner apartments guards were appointed. Inside and outside the city guards were appointed. Inside and outside the district guards were appointed. But, revered sir, although I was thus guarded and protected, I lived fearful agitated, distrustful, and afraid. But now, revered sir, on going alone into the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty place, I am fearless, unagitated, confident, and unafraid. I live unconcerned, unruffled, my needs satisfied, with the mind become like a deer's. Seeing this, revered sir, prompted me on going into the forest to utter constantly, "Ah, what bliss, ah, what bliss." Then, on realizing its significance, the Lord uttered on that occasion this inspired utterance. In whom exist no inner stirrings, having passed beyond being this or that, free from fear, blissful and sorrowless, the devas are not capable of seeing him. That's from Udana 2, number 10. As can now be seen, Nibbana brings forth the fruit of bliss. In turn, the factors leading to Nibbana need to be nurtured along with the other seeds, terrain, and aspects of cultivation laid out in the Buddha's teaching. This fruition is the Buddha's sole goal in dedicating his efforts to teaching and training others throughout his long and illustrious life. All the teachings compiled in this collection are for aiding us in our search for well-being and peace. Having reached that Nibbana is a possibility for ourselves. We are able to take the seeds, prepare the ground, and cultivate the fruit. The bliss of tasting and being nourished by this fruit is a principle of nature that we are all able to realize. A last example illustrating this principle of Nibbana as a state of intrinsic well-being comes in the Udana. In the previous sutta passage, Bhattacharya described the bliss of Nibbana as experienced in this life. In this passage, after the passing away of Dabba the Malian, the Buddha affirms that Nibbanic bliss is not affected or altered by the death of the body. This is from Udana 8:10. Just as the born is not known of the gradual fading glow, given off by the furnace-heated iron as it is struck with the smith's hammer, so there is no pointing to the born of those perfectly released, who have crossed the flood of bondage to sense desires and attained unshakable bliss. Now a few selections from In the Buddha's Words, Bhikkhu Bodhi, starting on page 364, The Goal of Wisdom. Um, 33 synonyms for Nibbana. Monks, I will teach you the unconditioned and the path leading to the unconditioned. Listen. And what, monks, is the unconditioned? The destruction of lust, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion. This is called the unconditioned. And what, monks, is the path leading to the unconditioned? Mindfulness directed to the body. This is called the path leading to the unconditioned. Monks, I will teach you the uninclined, the taintless, the truth, the far shore, the subtle, the very difficult to see, the unaging, the stable, the disintegrating, the unmanifest, the unproliferated, the peaceful, the deathless, the sublime, the auspicious, the secure, the destruction of craving, the wonderful, the amazing, the unailing state, Nibbana, the unafflicted, dispassion, purity, freedom, non-attachment, the island, the shelter, the asylum, the refuge, the destination, and the path leading to the destination. Listen. And what, monks, is the destination? The destruction of lust, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion. This is called the destination. And what, monks, is the path leading to the destination? Mindfulness directed to the body. This is called the path leading to the destination. Thus, monks, I have taught you the unconditioned, the destination and the path leading to the destination. Whatever should be done, monks, by a compassionate teacher out of compassion for his disciples, desiring their welfare, that I have done for you. These are the roots of trees, monks. These are empty huts. Meditate, monks. Do not be negligent, lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you. And that's from the Samyutta Nikaya 43. It's a very long sutta that actually goes through all sorts of other paths leading to the destination in addition to mindfulness directed to the body, but starts with mindfulness directed to the body and goes through many of the other practices that lead to the same destination. Thus have I heard. At one time the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion the Blessed One was instructing, rousing, inspiring, and gladdening the monks with a Dhamma talk connected with Nibbana. And those monks were receptive and attentive, concentrating their whole mind, intent on listening to the Dhamma. Then on realizing its significance, the Blessed One on that occasion uttered this inspired utterance. There is, monks, that base where there is neither earth, nor water, nor heat, nor air, neither the base of the infinity of space, nor the base of the infinity of consciousness, nor the base of nothingness, nor the base of neither perception nor non-perception, neither this world nor another world, neither sun nor moon. Here, monks, I say, there is no coming, no going, no standing still, no passing away, and no being reborn. It is not established, not moving, without support. Just this is the end of suffering. Udana 8.1. Thus have I heard. At one time the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion the Blessed One was instructing the monks with a Dhamma talk connected with Nibbana. And those monks were receptive, intent on listening to the Dhamma. Then on realizing its significance, the Blessed One on that occasion uttered this inspired utterance. There is, monks, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. If, monks, there were no unborn, unbecame, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned, no escape would be discerned from what is born, become, made, conditioned. But because there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned, therefore an escape is discerned from what is born, become, made, conditioned. Udana 8.3. There are, monks, these two Nibbana elements. What are the two? The Nibbana element with residue remaining and the Nibbana element without residue remaining. And what, monks, is the Nibbana element with residue remaining? Here, a monk is an arahant, one whose taints are destroyed, one who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached his own goal, utterly destroyed the fetters of existence, one completely liberated through final knowledge. However, his 5 sense faculties remain unimpaired, by which he still experiences what is agreeable and disagreeable, still feels pleasure and pain. It is the destruction of lust, hatred, and delusion in him that is called the Nibbana element, with residue remaining. And what, monks, is the Nibbana element without residue remaining? Here a monk is an arahant, one completely liberated through final knowledge. For him, here in this very life, all that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. that monks is called the Nibbana element, without residue remaining. These monks are the two Nibbana elements. And that's from the Itivuttaka 44. So I'll leave it there for the night's readings and see if anybody has any comments or questions, thoughts.
Have you ever memorized like verses about Nibbana or done anything like that as a contemplation or for inspiration?
Myself, no, not. I mean, I've memorized some things like some of the suttas, the cardinal suttas in English is very helpful. That points to Nibbana at the end of them. The final paragraphs pointing to complete release of those bhikkhus who realize that. So maybe in that context. But like the ones that I've just read, I haven't committed those to memory. Probably a good thing to do. I don't know if anybody else has with good. Mm-hmm.
That whole thing. There's all sorts of phrases that are very inspiring, and that's one of the things we can do to help uplift the mind and bring it back on track. Set a compass point for the mind, so that those phrases on Nibbana. I haven't memorized that one on the unconditioned that Nibbana Sutta, but there's any number of ones that are just as meaningful. It depends on what strikes people. It certainly is helpful to memorize. And the Pali is really good to use, because it tends to take one back to the roots of what the Buddha is pointing to.
Two elements of Nibbana, or
With remainder and without remainder.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of curious if one of the Ajahns could speak on the second type, and it's like whatever is felt. What was there, like the significance of that, and how that differs from the first one, I guess.
Right. The second one being one completely liberated through final knowledge. For him, there is this very life. For him, here in this very life, all that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. That monks is called the Nibbana element, without residue remaining. It's a little curious because of the way that it's worded. I've always heard it explained by others that it's referring to at death. The Buddha or the enlightened person's experience, that's the difference without residue. But I don't know if you've encountered other explanations for that.
Yes, there's plenty of other explanations. They've been debating them for 2,500 years.
The one that I just said is the one that makes the most sense to me, anyway.
Right, I said,
Yeah.
But there are lots of explanations put forward what the Buddha meant.
Is there one in particular, or a way that you?
Pardon?
Is there a particular way that you think makes
Well,
sense?
similarly for me, the nature of the Dhamma is santitiko, to experience it here and now.
I think what kind of points to it for me in that explanation is the fact that in his description of the first with residue remaining, he actually points out, however, his five sense faculties remain unimpaired, by which he still experiences agreeable, disagreeable, pleasure, pain. And then says that the Nibbana that's experienced is the destruction of the lust, hatred, and delusion. But then in the second paragraph, when he talks about without residue remaining, there isn't that description of the five sense faculties remaining intact. Which
is confusing. As I said, it's been debated for 2,500 years, and all sorts of treatises have been done.
Do you think in the Pali, for the second part where it says everything that is felt will become cool right there, do you think that being cool right there is, maybe etymologically, is it like divinity or something like that? Or?
It would be divinity or Nibbana or something like that. It would be a derivative of Nibbana.
Okay. Take a break, come back at 7 for puja.